Hello to everybody tuning in online. I think this is one of the first time we have way more people in person than online, so thank you all for coming in. It's awesome to see your faces and get to know you a little bit more personally. Before we get started, just want to point out we are actually using the microphones in the ceiling, so anything that you say, the stream will hear, and so will YouTube, so don't say anything you would regret. And also try not to fumble around too much in the background because that will also get picked up by the mics. But yeah, let's go ahead and get started. So my name's Emmett. I'm a manager of engineering here at Black Airplane, which is the building that we're in right now. I have a background in native Android and iOS development. I've been using Flutter for a little over 3 years. I've built over 17 different Flutter apps, and we have several more in progress. And I love Flutter so much that I also use it for my own personal projects. I also want to give a quick shout out to Black Airplane. I want to thank them for the food, the beer, and for letting us use this awesome space to use it for this meetup. Black Airplane is a leading development agency in the Southeast, and we have a really special team of people here that produce top quality work, and these days we're able to build pretty much anything. So today we're going to be talking about using Google Analytics in your Flutter app. So first I want to start off, let's just imagine you've been working for months on this new app, and you finally just launched it. You're super excited, everything's going well. Your marketing bros are killing it. Your user base is blowing up. You've got over 25,000 active users, and your app is going to the moon. But there's one problem. Your app review is in bad shape. You're getting a ton of bad app reviews. What's the first thing you're going to check? Well, maybe you'll check your crash reports, right? Because the most likely thing is your app's crashing left and right. But you see that your app's actually doing pretty well, 98% crash free. We'll just say that that's some weird Android devices that you're having issues with. But in general, you're doing pretty well. So what could be the problem? Why are you getting bad reviews? Well, we need to see how people are actually using your app. We need to actually gather some information on what's going on here. So it's time to add Google or Firebase Analytics to your app. Google Analytics is actually Google Analytics for Firebase, so when you see Firebase Analytics, just know it's the same thing. You can actually use the data in both consoles, whether it's the Firebase console or the Google Analytics console, and the package is actually called Firebase Analytics. So let's go ahead and add the package to our project. If you're a Flutter developer, you've done this 100 times. You add the package to your pub spec YAML, you make sure that it's all included there with your running. You'll import it and then just add it to a file, probably your main.dart file, just to get everything initialized. These couple of lines of code will unlock a ton of value for you right away. Just this one little setup is going to already give you access to a ton of information. And these huge insights come right out of the box. So right out of the box, you're going to see things like your user activity over time, your users in the last 30 minutes. You can even see a real-time map of the world as people open your app and where they're using it in real time. You'll be able to see things like what version your users are using, so you can help track down issues even better that way. Really important metrics as well, like average engagement time and user retention. So this is going to give you some general insights of how are people using my app? Are they sticking around for a long time? Are they enjoying their experience? Am I able to retain them over a long period of time? And it'll start to give you some very basic hints into what might be going on in your app. But a lot of times, that's not enough. Maybe I need to find a very specific issue. So in that case, what are we going to do? First, we're going to look at recommended and custom events. With a couple lines of code, you can start logging all different types of events. And there's actually a lot of recommended events out of the box that we'll look at in just a second. But what this is going to do is it's going to start tracking it in your Firebase and Google consoles, which you can then utilize later to analyze the problem. So let's look at some of these recommended events for all apps. All is a very broad term, so you'll have to limit these based on your feature set. But if you're using advertisements, you might have things like ad impressions, earning virtual currency, generating leads, or some really interesting ones, maybe like these bottom, tutorial begin and tutorial completion. Maybe you have a really complicated app, and the reason you're getting so many bad reviews is all of your users decided to skip the optional tutorial at the beginning. So maybe you found out through this process that everybody's starting the tutorial, but only 10% of people are finishing the tutorial. And by actually making the tutorial mandatory for your app, you'd be able to fix your review issue by using these custom events and learning that through funnels. So funnels will actually allow you to set up a visual aspect to analyze your data and basically go through all the different items in your app that you want them to be doing and be able to mark an entry point and mark the final action that you want them to be able to do. So this will allow you to try and streamline this user experience of getting them from their initial intent to the action you want them taking as easy as possible, and also see where the drop-off is. If that's still not enough, with Google Analytics, you can also track where users spend time. So in Flutter, you have to do this a more manual process with logging events for screen views. And this will basically allow you to see exactly which screens your users are spending their most time on. This could show you where a hang is happening or like a really long load time that could be causing those bad app reviews as well. So bonus. Supercharging your experience with other Firebase features. This is where Google Analytics really shows its strength. The first thing that you're going to do is going to create audiences. So based on all of those events that we just logged and all of the data that's automatically logged, you can actually hook up audiences to be things like recently active users, maybe just people that are actually spending money in your app. Or they even have some predictive options that you can look at that'll do things like, who do we predict is going to churn in the next 7 days or the next 30 days? So you can actually target people with specific campaigns to say, I think I'm going to lose this user. I'm going to utilize my information on them to try and get them to stay or send them an offer to try and retain them. But beyond that, once you have actually created these audiences, they're usable all across the Engage suite of Firebase. So this is huge. Things like A/B testing, cloud messaging, in-app messaging, and remote config especially are going to allow you to use this analytics to optimize for certain outcomes that you want. So for remote config, for example, for those of you that are unfamiliar, it allows you to remotely toggle experiences on and off based on certain actions. So you could even use AI to predict, I want them to only see features that'll make my app the most crash-free. You can set that up 100% AI and it will automatically determine certain users' devices will crash with these specific screens. So we're actually going to block those features for them. And all of that can be handled for you automatically using the Google Analytics and audience system here. So when you actually go through and just add these couple lines of code and start adding the events that you're looking for, you're going to not only have a better insight on your users and help make a better product, but you're also going to be able to leverage all of these other systems that will allow you to maximize their purchase amount and keep them in your app longer, which is what's going to make your app as successful as possible. That is Google Analytics and Firebase Analytics in a nutshell. Does anybody have any questions? Yeah, Richard.
So you're building this audience for your app and you get all this data on how they're using it and how they act. Is there any way currently, I guess, to get that data and transfer it between applications if you wanted to sort of track somebody between apps that you've created?
I'm sure there's all sorts of regulations on what you can do with that data.
I mean, like, if they don't know about it.
Yeah. If they did know about it or if there was some sort of tie between your applications, you can hook more than one Android or iOS app to a Firebase project. And with that instance, you could actually track these analytics across multiple apps and fit them into certain audiences. So if you had a suite of products like the Google products, you could attach all of these to a Firebase account and analyze how you're using all of those different apps and put together campaigns specifically based on that. Yeah, well,
I'm curious, this is speculative about just your opinion here, this predictive feature that you were showing off. Like, do you think that they're actually using like a ML model that's gaining insights from the broader user base of Google to make these sorts of predictions on who's going to churn and that sort of thing?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My other thing is with the remote config, I hope I'm getting this right, but you're saying it'll lock out. So if this people with this particular phone or this version of Android, these features are crashing, it'll lock those features out to improve the experience. So if you push code to resolve all of that, will it recognize it and re-enable those features essentially?
Remote config is very powerful. I don't think I would use it to actually turn off features using AI. Typically where we use it in our projects is we'll add it as almost a safeguard. So what that means is, if we launch a very complicated app and all of a sudden one very specific flow is failing, we can toggle this and turn it off. And you're actually able to add a whole bunch of conditions around it. So I could turn it off for the specific app version 1.1.2, and then as soon as 1.1.3 comes out, it'll automatically be on by default, so it'll be re-enabled.
So it's like a granular rule set that you can apply.
Correct. But the audiences just kind of supercharge that.
Okay.
Is that done with like normal Firebase TypeScript kind of stuff, or can we use Dart?
It's actually all through the Firebase UI, setting up the remote config rules on what's enabled and not. Any other questions? See if anyone online has questions.
When you were you're talking about if you think they're really like having an ML kind of model at IO, man, they were all in on
Yeah.
bold but responsible.
Yeah. Like I just did a talk for North Atlanta JS about TensorFlow and Vue.
Yeah.
And I was using some pre-trained models on TensorHub to do like image classification and emotion recognition and things like that. So like that's all Google backed. So
Yeah.
people
Yeah,
at
no,
Google
they
are
were-
training those models. So imagine what they have in the secret sauce behind the curtains kind of regions. Like I imagine it's a really refined ML model.
What were you going to ask, Ross?
The biggest new takeaway I got here, because I added these in, and yes, you very quickly are able to glean a lot of insights on how many people are actually getting past my tutorial all before they just bounce because they're like, I don't want to do this, for example. And I was, the funnel stuff I had not messed with at all, which is very interesting. And so you were saying that this is useful for, you mentioned like specific actions and how quickly people get there or how much they bounce off. So are you like defining, you're saying, hey, what's an action I want to see, how people get to it or don't? Is that kind of how this works?
Yeah, I want to share a project, personal project. I don't really have any users on this project yet, but just to show kind of what this flow looks like, I do recommend, Firebase and Google are kind of doing this trend where they're starting to send you to GCP to start managing your resources. I kind of take that as just assume we're going to start seeing more Google consoles versus Firebase consoles. They're doing this for cloud functions and for analytics. They'll have that button in the top right, see more in Google Analytics. You're going to get more power when you actually go to the Google Cloud Console to actually look at these things. But with the Explore, this is really interesting, right? So you have your home, which is going to be your normal dashboard here. You're going to have your reports if you actually want to generate specific reports based on something. And then your Explore is for you to interpret your data, right? All of this data isn't useful unless you have a way to interpret it. So they have these free-form charts you can build, blank charts, funnel exploration, which is what I showed you there, but also path exploration, which is pretty interesting. So you can start messing with these variables and settings and start to see, okay, 74 people who have a session start get to a screen view. That's not very useful, but when you have the custom events in here, and I can say, this many people looked at my product offering page, and then this many people bought this one or this one or this one, and being able to see it and interpret it is very powerful. Yeah.
One more question. You jogged my memory with this. When you were talking about the custom events piece, it started to sound like the beginnings of like a full story, like what we would use a full story for, where you could have heat maps, watch user sessions, like all that kind of stuff. So do you think there's any opportunity in the Flutter ecosystem for somebody to use that to create kind of a tool in the ecosystem that would give you some of that functionality, like heat maps in your app and that sort of thing?
Google doesn't, at least not out of the box, isn't going to give you a heat map. There is another analytics tool that will. I've used it on a Flutter web project. I have not used it on a mobile project. I'm not sure how supported it is, but it's actually Microsoft's called Clarity. Microsoft Clarity. Microsoft Clarity, also a free analytics tool. Maybe we'll have a discussion on that and do a comparison here, but you do get a heat map session on what's going on. I think that can be very powerful. It's one of those things that when I was using it, it's more just fun to look at than I was able to deem real value from.
Okay.
But you theoretically could, do a heat map on mobile, but you don't have the cursor sitting around, so it's just going to be a tap heat map. And you could log that yourself with custom events and make your own view for that if you really wanted to.
The Door Hub team has gotten a lot of value out of the watching user sessions.
Like the
for
fully
emails.
recorded
Yes.
session.
Do you think that's a possible thing that happens in the Flutter ecosystem at some point?
I could see it happening. I'm not sure what rules the app stores have around full tracking. I think that would be your bigger issue on mobile.
Gotcha.
Not so much that it's not possible. It's definitely possible. It'd be more about Apple's new privacy and Google's new privacy requirements.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Maybe not so much a question, but just a testament to, I recently just made a social media post about how I was able to successfully say, hey, I know how many people have like made a wheel using the app that I've developed, right? And share like in celebration, like, hey, this many people have used it. Now, obviously it's probably way more than that, I consider all these numbers quite fuzzy. I don't know if that's kind of your, I put the error bars pretty wide for whatever I see, because people can opt out and different phones and all these different things. But that to me was another fun benefit, was to be able to like track, what people are doing, even if they're not putting it into Firestore or whatever.
It's really important from a business perspective to have these numbers. If you're ever going to go pitch an app to somebody and you don't know your daily, weekly, monthly active users at a minimum, then you're going in empty-handed. You at least need to have this out of the box solution for Google Analytics, which really is 2 lines of code and adding the package. So there is no excuse not to have this included. And let me tell you, when you launch an app and you are getting super excited about people downloading your app, because it's a very exciting time, you can view that real-time map of seeing people use your app, and they'll pop up on the map as a little heat map, and you can see that. That is very addicting and very motivational. So you should do it just for yourself in that sense. Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to kind of like piggyback a little bit off that and say my app is a web app. My company's app is a web app, but it's really an app. It's helping people fill out a mortgage application basically, but you don't want to download a mobile app for that. So it's an app on the web, but it's treated like an app. And so we don't use Firebase for our backend. We use AWS, and so ours isn't anywhere near as easy as that. I'm actually sending events back, and then they've got like a quick site, I guess, dashboard to see what's going on. But understanding where people get hung up, understanding what they're doing and stuff like that is critical. And you can make a lot of very important decisions based upon what they're doing. So
A lot of what we pitch here to clients that come to us is minimal viable product.
Yeah.
We say, build the smallest thing that will solve the problem that you think you have, and then go actually give it to those people and see what they think. That's great, but if you don't have a way to track what they think, then it's still useless. So you have to have this here to see how they interact with it, how they're thinking about it, and what's hanging them up. That's the only way you're actually going to be able to iteratively improve a product.
I have one more question for you, and I promise I'll stop.
No, it's good. That's the point.
So, in my experience, digesting marketing analytics or user analytics is a skill almost unto itself. Like, it's not required to be a developer, right? So, over the years, as you built your own side projects, like how much time did you spend in the beginning, or say several years ago, trying to figure out how to implement these tools, understand the data that you were getting from them, digest it, and how easily are you able to implement and digest those things today? And do you have any tips on like different places to learn and that sort of thing?
I do not claim to be a guru of figuring out user experience by any sense of the word, but I do really enjoy looking at the analytics, and I think it helps me make better applications. The biggest thing is I try and see what the user's doing, and then I put myself in their shoes. I try and recreate the flows that I see them going through, and I'm like, why are they feeling this way at this moment? And that's pretty much the best exercise that I can say to try and build an app, put it out there with the analytics, and then put yourself in your user's shoes based on your data, and then see and try and make assumptions on how to improve it. And with those other tools like the A/B testing, you can keep the current flow and use your audiences to partition them and show a new flow and see if it's better. Really, no one can guess customer behavior, even the experts. You really have to just trial and error until you find the right thing.
Going back to actually trying to maybe do it different ways, is there an API that we can get this data out of, or do we have to go to their
Google Analytics does have an API. There are certain things that they will limit. They will, like certain things like gender and I think personality traits, they will show that to you in your dashboards, but they will not expose it on an API.
And I think only show it once you've reached a certain threshold.
Correct,
I
yeah, you
think-
have to have a certain number of users before they'll show that kind of data as well. But, which is odd, because if you add this to your app and nobody else has it installed, and you open up your app and you're watching the map, it'll pop up in your city exactly where you are, so you can see
That's interesting.
yourself using your app, but they have to have a certain number before they'll share demographic data.
Sure.
Awesome. Any other questions before I wrap up?
I think I'm tapped out.
Well, thank you guys. Next time we're going to be examining some of the top Flutter packages here in a month. Again, we meet monthly. After this, if we're in person, we all typically head over to Reformation and have a drink and get to know each other a little better. So hope you all stick around for that. And anyone tuning in online, hope to see you in person next time. Thank you guys.